Samaneh Moafi is the Assistant Director of Research at Forensic Architecture, a multidisciplinary team based at Goldsmith, University of London. Forensic architecture utilizes architectural techniques and technologies to investigate cases of state violence, human rights violation, and environmental destruction. In her role, Samaneh is responsible for identifying and developing new areas of research, ensuring research quality and integrity, and directing the innovation of new analytic methodologies and processes. She obtained her PhD from the Architectural Association School of Architecture in 2018, focusing her dissertation on the contemporary history of state-initiated mass housing in Iran and its influence on class identities and gender roles. Throughout her career, Dr. Moafi has been actively involved in academia. She has taught at prestigious institutions such as the University of Technology, Sydney, the Bartlett School of Architecture, the Royal College of Art, and the Architectural Association in London. Her work as a researcher and architect has been showcased worldwide at renowned events and institutions, including exhibitions at the Manchester International Festival, a storefront for art and architecture, Tate Britain, and Venice Architecture Biennale. Through these exhibitions, Dr. Moafi has brought attention to critical issues related to architecture, human rights, and social justice on a global scale. So what is aesthetics? The notion of aesthetics that we invoke is distinct from its colloquial or specialist use. To aestheticize something is not to prettify or to decorate, but to render it more attuned to sensing. As such, it is also different from the way it's often used by practitioners of art and culture. Rather, we employ a variation on the classic meanings of the term. The ancient Greeks used the word aesthesis to describe that which pertains to the senses. Aesthetics thus concerns the experience of the world. It involves sensing, the capacity to register or to be affected, and sense-making, the capacity for such sensing to become knowledge of some kind. The finding or invention of means to achieve such effect is to aestheticize. Defining aesthetics in this way allows us to derive two other terms, hyperesthetics, which we consider to be the augmentation and elaboration of such experience, and hyperesthesia, which we consider to be the state in which experience overloads or collapses. And as a result, sensation stops making sense. In her presentation, Dr. Moafi questions whether it is possible to understand an investigation as a perspectival operation for the way it proposes new conditions of knowing, seeing, and doing. Organized around the ongoing work of forensic architecture on the 2017 fire at Grenfell Tower, this talk engages with aesthetics as a dual field of sensing and sense-making, and sets out to contextualize its power as an investigative practice.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's kind of humbling to hear it, and I really love the way that that you use the parts of the book to frame this presentation. Also, I'm gonna jump into this. So let me do a share screen. All right. I'm not sure how many of you are seeing me through a 27-inch monitor, but if you do, move a little back so that there is 65 centimeters between your face and the monitor. If your monitor is smaller, do the math. You should be holding your face a little closer. Are you set? Okay. What you're experiencing at this distance is what an IOF shooter would have been able to see 190 meters away through a rifle scope of Trigion ACOG 4x32. We are by the Balat al-Shuhada Street near a refugee camp in Jenin in the West Bank, where Al Jazeera reporter Shireen Abu Akleh was killed. What you experience here is the point of view of a position within an armored vehicle. This armored vehicle, an MDT David. This is the sniper hole through which the IOF shooter, and in turn you and I, experienced Shireen's position in time and in space. We watched where she was. And this is where the vehicle was within the convoy of 5 armored vehicles packed at a 90-degree angle. And at the other end, 190 meters away, is Shireen and her colleagues. Let me come back to this optical reconstruction. One of the 4 findings that we submitted in the investigation our team at Forensic Architecture developed in collaboration with Al-Haq, challenging claims that it was not possible to determine the source of the fatal gunfire. It was claimed that even if one of the soldiers were responsible for Shireen's death, the shooter must have accidentally misidentified her. Our perspectival reconstruction showed that the shooter would have been very much able to identify Shireen as a journalist, that the journalist's press vest would have in fact been clearly visible through the rounds of gunfire. Our perspectival reconstruction enabled the seeing of something that would have not been seen otherwise, that was denied, in fact. What is an investigation, if not an operation, an aesthetic operation, with the promise of sensing and sense-making, an operation that opens up new ways of seeing, knowing, and doing? What is an investigation, if not a perspectival operation, an operation between the viewpoints of the near and the far, an operation that involves the tension between participation and alienating distanciation? The history of effects, Paul Reiser reminds us, is the history which takes place under the condition of historical distance. The tension between the near and the distant is essential to any historical consciousness. And it is this tension that I want to think with critically today. The question that it poses on time and on space as linear and Cartesian fields. The questions that it poses on rupture, on failure of representation, on consciousness, on perspectives, on fragments. In 1943, an English-language Jewish journal published an article titled "We Refugees" by Hannah Arendt. Having herself fled Germany under Hitler for life, Arendt thought with the condition of being a countryless refugee as a paradigm for a new historical consciousness. A reference that I feel is even more relevant today than it was in the 1940s. Refugees, Arendt wrote, driven from country to country, are the vanguards of their people. In the context of deadly migrations across the Mediterranean Sea, the experience of the refugees are rendered mute, designated to be lost. What is a perspectival operation in this context? About a month and a half ago, a boat leaving Libya for Italy with hundreds of migrants on board sank inside the Greek search and rescue zone in the Mediterranean Sea. Over 600 people drowned. Of course, Greece was the coastal state responsible for initiating the necessary search and rescue operations, but its coastal guard denied responsibility, claiming that people on board resisted offers for assistance. and that the boat capsized due to a sudden shift in weight. The survivors contested this account, but they had no way to share what they had seen apart from recounting their memories. Their phones were confiscated. The ship itself now rests some 5,000 meters under sea level, and so its retrieval is impossible. The only witnesses were the survivors of the migrant boats and the crew of a small open sea petrol vessel, the same vessel that is in fact accused by witnesses for the capsize. And so in this context, our sister agency, Forensics, worked with 5 of the survivors to help them reconstruct their memory, render what they had seen, and challenge the state narrative. I hope that you will hear the sound, so if you don't, just buzz me and we'll have to do something about it.
كان على اليمين ما هيك مسحبوكم
على
على الشمال.
اليمين على اليمين. لا واحد منهم يعني
نزل كيف نزل نط ولا
لا
سباق؟
كان هم رجعوا اخر شيء صاروا لزق فيه ايه بعدين بعدوا عن ربط الحبل وبعد
شو كان لون المسكة؟ هذا القراءة
اسود الحبل الربط هون
حطوا سباق بالبطيء.
So what happened afterwards? أول شدة انقطع الحبل.
First time
أول شدة هي كل الركاب راحوا على هاي قطع الحبل جلد.
move forward.
هم نفسهم رجعوا ربطوا ومكنوا وردوا سحبوا السحب الثاني بقوة. قالوا الحبل هيك صاروا نصيح عليهم نو 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 نو
يعني شيء 100 متر؟
أقل وقت جرونا أقل من 100 متر.
كان بسرعة ولا
بسرعة.
بطيء؟
لا بسرعة
حكيتوا وقتها أنت؟
ما صرنا نصيح عليهم صياح نو 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 وهم طبعا واحنا قاعدين نقلب واحد منهم واقف ينادي علينا يعني مش والله انه واحد منهم واقف من ورا ينادي علينا شلون قاعدين نقلب.
The Coastal Guard had tried to tow the migrant boat twice. Both attempts had lasted between a few seconds and a few minutes. The first time the rope had snapped. The second time, using the same rope, the Coastal Guard had pulled away even faster, causing the migrant boat to rock to the right, then to the left, then to the right again, and eventually capsize to the right. And so this is kind of like part of the work in reconstructing what took place. Situated testimony, the method that you saw part of which is a technique of interviewing developed by our team at Forensic Architecture over the course of over a dozen projects. It uses 3D models of the scenes and environments in which traumatic events occurred to aid in the process of gathering testimonies from witnesses to those events. Memories of traumatic events or violent episodes can be elusive or distorted, but we have found that the use of an architectural model has a productive effect for recollecting memories. Together with an architectural researcher, a witness is filmed reconstructing the scene of an event, exploring and accessing their memories of the episodes in a controlled and secure manner. And I say that because they can kind of move between an allocentric and egocentric point of view, right? They can snap into a position, an eye position, and they can come out again into an axonometric position, right? And this move between the allocentric and the egocentric is itself kind of like gives people the feeling of being in control of the experience they're kind of like going through again.
First, second,
First from here,
first,
then
second,
there, and then
then pull it.
How is it?
or 50 minute or 40 minute I sit. This is ice. No.
على الآخر
الآخر.
قالب على الآخر
الآخر.
يعني وقت هون قلب هيك نطيت بالمي سبحت طلعت من هون
مهم.
هون بعدوا عننا بعدوا صار بالناحية هاي هون قتلوا
Yeah.
هون قتلوا قتلة كبيرة سببوا موجة بالموجة هاي هيك قلنا هيك صار
يعني طلع بوزه لهيك.
لا ممكن يسمون فايتين يوم بالضبط هون هو قاعد يقلب أنا نطيت المي نطيت لهون هيك صرت أسبح رايح بدك تقول كانهم نزلوا القوارب واجوا يساعدونا بدك تقول اكثر من نص ساعه اكثر شوي.
I'm assuming the Coast Guard. Do you want to show us how far it is?
Like here,
ना देखना ही है ना केड़ा भी आ रहा है far far yeah
In line with the survivors' quest for justice, we made these perspectival reconstructions and the findings of the investigation available to all independent bodies seeking accountability for the incident. The refugee represents a kind of a disquieting element in the context of the inhumane and lethal, if I may, European border regime. A disquieting element in the order of the nation states involved. It brings the fiction of sovereignty to crisis. The refugee is a disquieting element in the order of human rights, actually. It breaks the identity between the human and the citizen, between nativity and nationality. Let's go back to Arendt's writing on the refugee. Contemporary history, she says, has created a new kind of human beings, the kind that are put into concentration camps by their foes, and in internment camps by their friends. She is, of course, the same Arendt who, in reporting on the trial of Adolf Eichmann, explains the way in which ordinary people become actors in totalitarian systems and coins the phrase the banality of evil. I want to use this to think with perspectival operations in relation to our work in paralegal forums and people's inquiries, ecologies of sensing and sense-making, discourses of sound and light. On the 14th of June 2017, soon after midnight, a fire broke out in a 24-story residential tower in London's borough of Kensington, the Grenfell Tower. 72 residents lost their lives, 42 of them Muslim, brown and black bodies, migrant bodies, 32 from the Middle East and North Africa, that is, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria, Sudan, Egypt, 14 from East and West Africa, 5 from Bangladesh. Injustice comes as a feeling before it comes as a thought. It can be aestheticized or anestheticized. To be politicized. Eyal Weizman writes in the book that I had shared with you, is to increase one's ability to be aestheticized to the world. In the phase 1 of the official Grenfell Tower inquiry, the one conducted by the state, the testimonies were recorded sequentially as linear text, and they were archived separate from one another. You can actually access it now through the website. for many of those that survived Grenfell, trauma and amplified some channels of sensing and reduced others. There were large stretches of erasure in the accounts. Traumatized witnesses struggled to describe their memories. And there were also the ones who lost their lives, who couldn't retell what they had gone through. We had a request from a group of bereaved survivors and residents of the Grenfell fire and the legal representatives, a group of some 400. And the request was for us to step in. It was kind of very close after the fire, and it wasn't clear what it was that we could do. We were just engaged. How do you develop a perspectival operation in a catastrophe of this scale in a way that is meaningful, that is accessible, and helps bring accountability? In the case that I'm sharing with you, for example, in this kind of like this pick from a situated testimony that we were doing with a bereaved family member. She is first describing the nights that there was kind of like a family gathering inside the home of her mother in the tower, the food that they had, what they were doing in this gathering. She leaves before midnight. And then at some point after midnight, her brother receives a phone call from the mother who lost her life. There is another phone call afterwards, and she knows that at some point between 1:20 and 1:30, her mother had left her flat, and she had chosen to go up the stairs instead of down. And by the way, I'm not using names because of the stage we're in the work. She knows that her mother had left the flat and has gone up the stairs instead of down, but she doesn't know why. She doesn't know whether her mother saw fire when she left her flat or she didn't. Did she hear the sound of the London Met helicopter that was present on the scene, or she didn't hear it? Is it the sound of the helicopter that forced her mother, that kind of encouraged her mother to go up the stairs in the hope that, you know, maybe the helicopter is there to save the residents? The helicopter was not there to save the residents, and it didn't even make it clear to those who were on the scene that it's not there to kind of save, it's there only to film. But so, you know, all of those questions are the questions that that the bereaved family member is dealing with. She just doesn't know. To answer these questions and questions of similar nature, we thought to piece together the existing accounts from the night, the existing kind of verbal account of the memories, written accounts, but also visual accounts. For example, Londoners had switched on their phone and recorded a few seconds, sometimes a few minutes, of the horror unfolding before their eyes. Some had later uploaded these videos online. These videos are not documenting the fire maybe in the most forensic way. When zoomed in, the camera is not able to capture the fire. It kind of just, the pixels are just showing light. When zoomed out, the camera is usually shaky. It's kind of like it's shaking a lot. It's moving left and right, and it's hard to map out exactly what is taking place. And so in this context, we began the work in the following way. For each and every video, we stabilized it, and we reconstructed the cone, the camera cone. So the way that it's moving, the way that it's zooming in and out, the way that it's moving left and right. And I'm kind of like showing you a bit of the behind the scene, a bit of my screen capture. Then we placed this camera into this 3D model of the tower, a very accurate 3D model that we reconstructed. You can see a process in which this camera that we have mapped, I'm bringing it in, I'm kind of like mapping it on the facade of the tower. I'm making sure that its position is right, exactly where it should be. And so in a way, the model of the tower becomes an anchor that is holding the video and its witness behind the camera in space. The next step was to synchronize every single video that we were able to gather from the night. Videos that were taken from around the fire, from different times. So you can see also on the top left of my screen a time code. So in a way, what we did was to synchronize the videos in relation to one another, in relation to time, because say, for example, one of them had a time, and so then all of the other ones would be able to have a time. And then we use these mappings of the fire in order to, of this kind of like these videos, we use them in order to produce a map of the progression of the fire, the speed with which it moved, the area that was on fire and the area that was burnt already, and the area that had internal fires and the area that was kind of like still safe. And then we use this mapping in order to produce a simulation, an accurate simulation of the fire itself, the smoke that was rising from it, and the debris that was falling from the building, from the facade onto the ground. Our simulation was also taking into account was on one hand, in a way, taking into account the videos and the kind of like the videos that were captured by witnesses on the ground, and on the other end, it was taking into account the meteorological conditions of the night, the speed of wind, for example, the direction of the wind, the humidity, so on and so forth. This simulation was for us a kind of a clock. With it, we could synchronize the data from the accounts from within the tower. So for example, here is a reconstruction that one of the witnesses on the 21st floor of the tower, if I'm not wrong, was sharing of the moment, the very moment that fire broke into his flat through the window, and the Moses basket of the child that they were expecting caught on fire. So he was reconstructing this kind of like this experience, but he didn't necessarily had the precise time in which this had taken place. And we were able to synchronize that kind of like with the mapping that we had done from the outside. In the similar way, we could use this clock to go back and forth in time and really kind of even time code videos that didn't have a time code. So for example, imagine, like, look at this moment rendered from a different perspective, right? So this is a rendering of this moment from a position on the Grenfell Walk, looking up. This is an area that a lot of kind of like residents were staying at for the first kind of like minutes, for the first hour maybe. And it was important because it was documenting the ladder, the only ladder that the London Fire Brigade had managed to bring on site, a ladder that could hardly reach the first, the bottom half of the tower, right? And so we also know that the London Fire Brigade is one of the defendants, as well as the London Met that I had mentioned before. So, okay, so all of these kinds of processes of thinking were suddenly possible. So this simulation that we had developed, which was a continuous map, right, a continuous clock, was enabling the syncing of experiences from within, experiences on the ground could then be synced with this map, with this clock, I feel like. And now I want to speak to, and this is kind of like where I want to slowly begin to conclude. I want to close with a limit condition, a rupture that I came across in our work. This is a screen capture from a situated testimony that we were doing with one of the people who were present on the on Grenfell Walk, the same place I was showing you the video from. And so here the witness is telling me the kind of like the exact way in which she could see the smoke, right? She's marking exactly where she could see fire on the space of the building. And with her, we are reconstructing the smoke. We're reconstructing the smoke, we're reconstructing the light, the fire. She's reconstructing the sound with us, the sound of the fire, the roaring sound that she kind of like, she very eloquently describes with a high level of detail, right? And I speak of a rupture because the time that she was on Grenfell Walk, and she tells this this experience, it's doesn't sync with the kind of with the clock that we had produced, with the continuous mapping of the fire that we had done around the tower. Time and space are in many ways anachronistic when it comes to trauma. Time and space become disruptive forces in a way, forces that break the wholesomeness of a chronology. When it comes to trauma, there cannot be a whole, or if there is, it is of fragments. It is a fragmented one. I shared today, and I'll kind of like stop my share screen. I shared today 3 perspectives. That of a soldier by a refugee camp in Jenin, an asylum seeker in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, whose experience was rendered mute, and a migrants inside their homes, inside their council home. I shared perspectival operations that include that part, it's part to them. The tension between the near and the distant is part to them. The tension between participation and alienating distanciation. I shared limits and I shared fragments. And so with that, I'll kind of, I'll conclude.